And right now we're learning the Chumash with Ohr Hachaim, and as I always mention, the Ohr Hachaim Hakadosh, the Holy Ohr Hachaim, always gives us um, insights that are on a different layer than Rashi. In other words, Rashi has his insights as more of a simple interpretation. The Ohr Hachaim likes to um, delve into the details of every verse and find some hint to either a halacha or something about how God runs the world or something that we should know to be extra careful about and protect ourselves from a certain avera, a certain sin, and it's hinted to in the pasuk. In other words, it's a layer of hint, of remez. This is another dimension of the Torah. The Torah has the dimension of pshat, which is the simple meaning, but it also has like a deeper layer. So when we're learning this Chumash with Ohr Hachaim, we're delving into a deeper layer of the Torah, where the Ohr Hachaim finds hints to something mentioned in the Gemara or some inspirational idea or something mentioned in the Medrash. And so here, the Ohr Hachaim talks about the connection between Shoftim, which is this week's Torah portion, Shoftim, and the previous Torah portion that talked about the holidays. In the previous portion, in the end of Parshas Re'eh, it talks about the holiday of Sukkot. It talked about the holiday of Shavuos. It talked about Pesach. And so now it jumps into Shoftim, judges. Now, what is the connection between judges and the three holidays of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot? So the Ohr Hachaim comes up with a very interesting insight, and that is that what was the law that we all are familiar about with regard to the holidays, and that is that we have to travel to Jerusalem for the three major holidays. That was like the major, this was a major endeavor every time a holiday came around was going to the Beis Hamikdash. It was an exceptional opportunity and inspiration, and we would go there and we would see the miracles that would happen in the Beis Hamikdash. And in addition to that, what you had in the Beis Hamikdash was, in one of the rooms was called the Lishkas Hagazis, which was where the Sanhedrin, the major Jewish court, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people was. And so for the holidays, we always were right around the corner from the Supreme Court. So a person might think that what do we need to have a court in my town? Every year we go 3 times a year to the Beis Hamikdash. So good enough. I have a monetary issue. My next door neighbor is infringing on my property, or there's some issues, some court issue, the issue that I want to bring to court. So let me push it off for when we go to the Beis Hamikdash for the holidays, and I'll stay an extra day there and we'll deal with it, And so the Torah tells us, no. Shoftim v'shaitrim, judges and law enforcers, you shall appoint for yourself in all of your gates that Hashem your God gives you, in all of your gates for your tribes, and they shall judge the people with a judgment of righteousness. So the Torah is telling us that it's not enough to rely on the Supreme Court that's in Jerusalem, that you're going to be going 3 times a year when you go to, so to speak, appear before Hashem and to see and to be seen. It's not enough where you have the Sanhedrin Gedolah, where you have the big court. Nevertheless, you need to have judges and you should appoint them and not rely on the Supreme Court in Yerushalayim and by the Beis Hamikdash. And the reason for this, what's the reason for this? Because do not delay justice. Don't delay justice to the time that you're gonna, when you're gonna go to the place that Hashem will choose, for the pilgrimage. Don't delay it until that time. So it's telling us Shoftim that you're gonna go to the Beis Hamikdash 3 times a year, but at the same time that you're gonna go to 3 times a year, you should also have an obligation to appoint for yourself in all of your gates for your tribes. Now, that's the first insight. And what that tells us is how important it is in Jewish law to have a court system that is workable, meaning that is taking cases, that is able to handle the burden. And you need to have court. Very important in Jewish law that there should be courts. And the next thing that the Ohr Hachaim says is, I should mention that not only is it a Jewish law, but in one of the 7 Noahide laws is a court system. That to have a system of courts is a major obligation for society. So what we're seeing here is how the Torah tells us that it's not enough to rely on the courts that are the Supreme Court that's in Jerusalem. You need to have in every city, as we'll soon see, a system where you have courts, and you can you don't have to delay justice. Now comes the next thing, and that is, why does it say law enforcers? Okay, so you need judges in all of your appoint for yourself in all of your gates. Again, according to what the Ohr Hachaim just explained, the previous parsha talked about the 3 holidays, and you're going to go to Jerusalem anyway. You should know you need judges in your towns. Now, why does it emphasize here about law enforcers? Law enforcers are important, of course. We're going to need them, police, but why does it have to emphasize it here? It's the main point is that even though you go to Jerusalem, you need to have judges. Why does it have to tell us anything about law enforcers? So the Medrash says that if you don't have law enforcers, a judge is meaningless. That means that it goes hand in hand. If you're going to have judges, you need law enforcers. To the extent that if you do not have law enforcers, there is no mitzvah to even have judges, which basically means that the way the Ohr Hachaim spells it out, he says that if people are not going to listen to the judge, and the judges have no power, then there's no mitzvah to appoint judges. The whole mitzvah. So this is like a hint to a halacha, that the halacha is that if you cannot enforce your judgment, there's no mitzvah to have a judge. The Ohr Hachaim says, you know what? That's hinted to in this pasuk. Again, the Medrash mentions this, that if there's no shoiter, if there's no police, there's no ein shofet, there's no judge. And the Ohr Hachaim says that's actually a halacha, that the actual mitzvah doesn't apply unless you can enforce it. And one of the things that are done in a Jewish court is that they get everyone to sign that they are going to accept the judgment. And the reason for that is because if you don't have them sign it, then what is the purpose of making a judgment that you can't enforce? And to the extent that the Ohr Hachaim says that actually the mitzvah wouldn't apply. If you don't have the ability to enforce it, then there would not be a mitzvah to have judges. He says, however, if you're in a place where people listen to the judges, even without an enforcement, without a shiter, without a police, without enforcement, then you would have an obligation to appoint judges. And the judge is considered both a shofet and a shiter. So that's an interesting halacha, that, in other words, that you can fulfill this by in a situation where you're capable of enforcing the law, or it's going to automatically happen. In other words, your law, the community makes sure that your laws are enforced. So you're in a place where people listen to the dayanim, they follow. So in such a case, you would have the mitzvah of having a shofet, because you are considered the shiter, the judge. Anyway, bottom line is that what we see here is that judges and law enforcers go hand in hand. And that's spelled out in this, it's called the Psikta, which is one of the Midrashim. Now, now comes the next thing, and that is that it's titain lacha. You should appoint for yourself. So now we're talking about that the words for yourself here, that I guess you can see I've just highlighted, that judges and law enforcers, you should appoint for yourself. What does that mean? The Ohr Hachaim wants to go deeper, dig deeper, and say, what does it mean you should appoint for yourself? So maybe on a simple level, it just means that you need to, that the community, Hashem is not going to appoint them. You should appoint them yourselves. But the Ohr Hachaim says that it's actually emphasizing that the importance of, when you're appointing these judges, so the people who are appointing them have to remember that they are not above the law. They're not above the rules. You're appointing them, they're going to be on you. When you appoint them, the mitzvah of appointing them is that you appoint them, that they're not just over the rest of the community, they're appointed for yourself as well. And so the Torah is hinting to us that a person, if you want to fulfill the mitzvah properly of appointing judges, you have to realize that you're appointing them is not going to get you any brownie points. You're appointing them, you have to do it sincerely. It has to be for yourself. And it's not that you're just appointing them so that they're for everyone else, but you're above the law. There's no one who's above the law. When the Jewish people appoint judges and law enforcers, it's for everyone to be included in such a rule, in such an appointment, and there's no one who's above the law. Now comes the next point, and that is in all of your gates. And so the Ohr Hachaim says, what is the meaning? What does it mean in all of your gates? And Rashi had told us that every city has a obligation to have a judge. Now, the reason why Rashi says that is because gates, the understanding is that a city is meant to be fenced in, and so when it says in all of your gates, it would mean in all of your cities. Now, the Ohr Hachaim wants to know, why does it say all? The kol sha'arach. It could have gotten away with in your gates, b'sha'aracha, like it says that you have to put a mezuzah on your gates. And it means all of your gates. You should write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. It doesn't say all of your gates, but it means all of your gates. So why would it say here all of your gates? So here the Ohr Hachaim says, you know what it's hinting to? That not only do you need in Israel to have every city, but also you need to have in every district, that there's each city has, in every like district also a needs to have judges, and that's why it says all, that it includes. And the Ohr Hachaim brings a brisa, which is basically also like a medrash from the Sifri, that it says that the Sanhedrin Katana, the small court, has similar rulings and similar abilities as the big court called the Sanhedrin Gedolah, which basically means that in all of your gates is a hint to the fact that that you should appoint for yourself these judges and law enforcers in all of your gates, implying that the power that we give the Sanhedrin in the Lishkas Hagazis, the Supreme Court, that a lot of those powers are also given to the smaller courts, the 23 people court. So there's a 71 member court in Yerushalayim, and then there's also any city that has 120 people with 2 Torah scholars. It's supposed to have a small court called a Sanhedrin Katana, small Sanhedrin, a small courthouse, and that small courthouse would have 23 judges. So the pasuk is hinting to us that there's similar powers are given, that even a 23 people court, 23 staff court, a 23 judge court is also capable of killing, of doing capital cases. And the way the Ohr Hachaim understands it is from the word bekol sha'arecha, that like in all of your gates, that meaning that there's similarities, that there's, it's not only in the big Sanhedrin, in the main Supreme Court, but it's also in your other gates. It's like it's putting them in the same category. That's really what it's doing. It's saying b'chol sha'arecha, you also in all of your gates you should have these same shoftim, these same judges, meaning that it's in the same category as your Supreme Court is the other courts. Now it doesn't mean that it's exactly the same, but they fall under the same category, meaning there's rules that only the Supreme Court can judge, but if you want to categorize them, there are similarities between the small court and the big court, that the small court also does have powers similar to the big court. Now, then it comes the next wording in the pasuk, and it says that Hashem your God gives you. Here, it's right here that Hashem, okay, that Hashem your God gives you. So it's in your gates that Hashem gives you. Now, what does that mean? Where is the obligation to appoint judges? So we have a mitzvah to appoint judges, and as I mentioned earlier, this is part of Torah, is to make sure that there's justice in the world. That's how the world, the society, can really continue, and this is really an important part. We know it's from the fact that there's the 7 Noachide laws to have courts, and it's right here in Parsha Shoftim that we need to appoint judges, and it says that where do you appoint them? In all of your gates that Hashem your God gives you. What are our gates that Hashem gives us? So the Ohr Hachaim says that the mitzvah applies in Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, we have an obligation to appoint judges. Now, the question would be, what about outside of Eretz Yisrael? In other words, from these words that Hashem your God gives you, it sounds like it only applies in Israel. Any thoughts? What would be about outside of Israel? Anyone?
What was the question?
The mitzvah of appointing judges only applies, as the Ohr Hachaim wants to say, based on the wording of the pasuk, that it says that Hashem your God gives you, in your gates that Hashem your God gives you. And the Ohr Hachaim says, you know what that means? That the mitzvah only applies in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, not in Chutz La'aretz, not outside of Israel. My question is, I would think that outside of Israel is just as important. We need to have judges. I mean, especially knowing the fact that Hashem wants there to be justice in part. That's part of the Yiddishkeit, is everything should be just, and how terrible bribery is, and how important it is to have law. And
there you have Dina de Malchus Dina.
So Dina de Malchus Dina is true. So that could be an idea that
it applies.
So Isaac is answering that maybe outside of Israel, you do have the court system of where you live. So in such a scenario, you have a monetary case. You have Dina de Malchus Dina, the laws of monetary laws could apply there. Now, the question is that appropriate to go to an outside court when it comes to Jewish people? In other words, no. Is that appropriate to do?
Between Jews.
Between Jews. So would that be appropriate? So that could be problematic. In fact, it's really not
very problematic.
Not an appropriate thing to do. So can you rely on the Dina de Malchus Dina in that sense? And I don't think so.
No.
That wouldn't work. So why is there not a mitzvah to appoint judges in your cities outside of Israel? So
who's going to appoint?
What?
Who is going to appoint?
Why is there not a
problem also? Because you need to have coverage. That's why when it comes even to in Eretz Yisrael, it's a city with a certain number of people has a chiyuv on this. You're going to start making small Sanhedrins, 23. 3 you can put together, anybody can.
Right.
So you're only talking about 23, which is basically a capital court. That's the big difference. That this is like this, not a Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. It's like here we have county court, and then you have the civil court. The civil court is the real court. The county court, you go for the smaller stuff. But
I think it's I think it's because we have no enforcement.
That's a very good answer, Anna.
Also, right?
That as the Ohr Hachaim told us earlier, you need to have law enforcement in order to have the mitzvah of appointing judges. And outside of Israel, if you don't have law enforcement, you can't appoint judges. It's a very good answer. And another answer that's possible is that this mitzvah that we're talking about here is that the obligation to have courts is in every city and in every district. Now, a district would be like a more of a bigger area that covers a number of cities. Now, what the understanding of some of the commentaries here is that the Ohr Hachaim is basically saying that every city in Israel deserves to have its own court. But outside of Israel, a district is enough. To have it in every city, you don't have an obligation. So when the pasuk says in all of your gates that Hashem gave you, that's the obligation to have in all of your cities. But the fact that there's a mitzvah to have in districts, that would apply even outside of Israel, which basically means that along the lines of what Isaac was saying, that to have a major court, that would apply in Israel where you have the concentration of Jewish people. But outside of Israel, you would have maybe more of a district type of court in that would cover the Jewish people, but it would cover more cities and more area. It would, because of maybe the less concentration of the Jewish people, it wouldn't be an obligation to have a court in every city. So that's another way of explaining it. Again, Anna, you gave a nice answer, and Isaac, your point I think is also
I think also it's interesting is unlike a civil system, what's missing from our system? And the answer is an appeal process. You don't go from a smaller Sanhedrin to the upper Sanhedrin. Whichever court ruled on your matter is done. And there is no appeal to a higher court, a bigger court, other rabbanim, or anything like that.
So what you're saying is that there is no concept of appeals in Jewish law?
No, I'm saying that in our court system, in our civil court system, there are no appellate courts. I don't believe you go from one bezdin to another.
So the only thing that I believe would work is if you went to the head Sanhedrin in the in Lishkas Hagozis, because they were considered like the Supreme Court.
They can handle anything, but they have to. I believe they have to accept the case. It's like our Supreme Court here. Right. They get 3,000 applications, but they only accept 80 cases.
Right.
To review.
Right. So the Supreme Court of in Yerushalayim would have to decide if they want to revisit the judgment of
that is if it serves enough, or if there's some way that it's going to take that district off of the rest of the cloud. They have to look at the halacha and how it's applied to everybody. So if they have a decision that they feel that the klal needs clarity as to what the halacha is, and that's how our Supreme Court usually works, that when you have two decisions from two different circuits, then it decides between the circuits.
Right. That makes sense. That's the common scenario where the Lishkas Hagozis would judge is if something's unclear from the other courts. So the Lishkas Hagozis would give a final verdict clarifying these cases. Okay, so getting back to the Ohr Hachaim over here. So now we have that the fact that it says in all of your gates that Hashem your God gives you, which basically emphasizes Israel, and then it says for your tribes. Now I put the previous words in brackets, and this way you could read it without them. Because that's what's meant. It's meant to read: judges and law enforcers you shall appoint for yourself in all of your gates and for your tribes. In all of your gates for your tribes. So in other words, it's meant for the Shoftim, for the tribes. So in a certain sense, you could even exclude in all of your gates, or you could put that in parentheses. You should appoint for yourself for your tribes. Really, we could put a parentheses there. That's really maybe better. You should appoint judges and let me take that out. Okay. You should appoint for yourself judges and law enforcers for your tribes. But why does it have to say for your tribes? Every city. What's the emphasis here? So the Ohr Hachaim here takes us into some complicated Talmudic discussion, and basically tells us what happens if there's a city that city is a city that has two tribes that are that dwell in that city. For example, Yerushalayim has Benjamin and Judah. Benjamin, Binyamin, and Yehuda are in the tribe of, are both, there are areas in Yerushalayim that also has Yehuda. In addition, in other areas, Binyamin. So what
And the
happened?
line went through the Beis Hamikdash. And the Lishkas Hagazis had to be on top of half and half. It covered both halves.
So what is the law with regard to other cities in that scenario? So the Ohr Hachaim says that it's for your tribes, and the question is, if wouldn't it have been better if it said judges and law enforcers you should appoint for yourselves, for your tribes? It should have said it here, for your tribes. Why does it wait and it first adds the in all of your gates that Hashem your God gives you, and then it says for your tribes? For your tribes belongs earlier. And the Ohr Hachaim says that the reason why it says this is because maybe because it says and they shall judge the people with a judgment of righteousness. Now, what does it mean? And they shall judge the people with a judgment of righteousness. What this means is that you know how you're going to judge people with a judgment of righteousness. The way that'll happen is if you give each tribe their own court. Because if each tribe has their own court, so the tribe of Benjamin won't be going to Judah's tribe court, and the tribe of Judah won't be going to Benjamin's tribe court, but rather each one will have their own court, and the judges will be able to maybe understand their way of thinking or their way of their situation better because it's part of their tribe. So if you want to have a just judgment, a righteous judgment, in order to do that, you need to have a court for each tribe. And so it wants the word, so the way the verse words it is for your tribes, and they shall judge the people with the judgment of righteousness. That you need a court for each tribe in order that they shall judge the people with a judgment of righteousness. You need it to be that way if you want it to be just. And it says, judge the nation, the people, meaning that everyone will have equal justice because each tribe will be judged before its own court. So that's the way the Ohr Hachaim explains why the wording is that way. And this follows the opinion of Tosfos that Tosfos is one of the commentaries of the Gemara. And in Sanhedrin, he says that when you have a city that has two tribes, you need to appoint a separate court for each of the tribes. The Rambam argues on it, but this is the opinion of Tosfos, and basically, this is the way the Ohr Hachaim sees it in the pasuk. So again, we're seeing in the verse a hint for something later on that's discussed in Jewish law. We see a hint to it in the actual pasuk. So again, it's we're seeing little bits of gems of wisdom hinted to by just simply the way the pasuk, the verse is worded. And it says, for your tribes, and they shall judge the people with the judgment of righteousness, that it's mentioning that for your tribes, that each tribe should have their own court, and this will allow that there's going to be a judgment of righteousness. And that's basically an understanding one of the understandings of explaining this verse. And according to this, the Ohr Hachaim says it actually fits the way the grammar is. It doesn't say you shall judge the people justly. It says almost like in third part. It's in third party and they shall judge the people with a judgment of righteousness, meaning that by doing it this way, that's what will come out of it. Almost like this is not an obligation. It's not that you should. This is not where it's telling you have to judge righteously. Here, it's making it as almost like it will happen. Not that you should do this, more that it's going to happen. It's like passive. But the reason why it says it in such a passive way, and it's indirectly, is because it's more about what's going to happen. Because of this, it's going to end up happening that they will judge righteously. So that's the continuation of this insight. It explains the grammar of the verse. Now, Rashi doesn't learn that way. Rashi on the pasuk says that Rashi says v'shaftu es ha'am. Rashi understands this to be a obligation, and they shall judge the people righteously means you have to hire righteous judges in order for them to judge righteously. In other words, so the end of the pasuk is emphasizing the importance of getting experts and getting righteous judges in order that they will judge in a just way. So, in other words, it's according to Rashi, it's not going on the fact that it's for the tribes that you're going to have two different courts for each tribe in the same city, but it's emphasizing that the importance of having righteous judges so that they will judge righteously. And so it seems the way Rashi is learning it is that this is the obligation of hiring righteous judges. Now, the Ohr Hachaim says that according to Rashi, the pasuk would have been better if it says the Shoftim b'tzedek titen l'cha. That maybe it should have been. It would flow better if it actually says righteous judges. You should appoint for yourself. In other words, the way the pasuk is worded, the Ohr Hachaim says it fits a little better the way I'm explaining it. Now the Rambam doesn't hold this law, so the Rambam can't explain it the way the Ohr Hachaim just explained, because the Rambam says that if you have two tribes in one city, one bezdin, one court is good enough. So the Rambam doesn't agree with the opinion previously that we mentioned, and therefore it could be that the Rambam holds a more maybe a more complicated way of explaining the verse, that you should appoint for yourself. It says in all of your gates that Hashem your God gives you for your tribe, and that you should appoint for yourself these judges and law officers, law enforcers for your tribes. So the way the Rambam must learn is not that a city that has two tribes would need two courts, but that the initial understanding of the verse is that you need to appoint for your tribes. That's number one. Every tribe should have a court, should have courts. Now, once you're going to have for every city, then in a certain sense, you don't really need to worry about the different tribes. In other words, the tribes was, if you're not going to have in every city, then you would need to have for every, then then if you weren't going to have in every city, then the pasuk would come out of its way, go out of its way, and say, that or we would understand that you would need to have at least for every tribe. But now that the gates in all of your gates means in every city, now we're not going to explain it. We're not going to, the obligation wouldn't be that each tribe needs its own court. What does this mean? What this means is that the simple way of understanding this would be that every district would need maybe a court.
Can I have a question?
Yes.
Rabbi, it is amazing the wisdom of rules that you're explaining. We live in Minneapolis now, and 30 minutes from us, it's a beautiful small town. It's called St. Cloud. It just happened to be a city that is divided between American law and Sharia law. It is absolutely Sharia court, and it is Sharia, area where people don't even follow any other rules. And it's interesting, you talked about, police that really make sure that what the judge's decision was done, it will be applied. But police doesn't even come in this territory because people who believe in Sharia law do not follow any suggestions. We have in Minneapolis large areas, since George Floyd situation where police is not going at all. You cannot ever call the police to come, or even a emergency room, because people are afraid. It's a constant shooting there. I'm sorry, but it's
this
just
this is in the United States?
Yes. It's in Minnesota that used to be the most peaceful Minnesota, nice state in the whole country. And now that's what it is. And it's just a situation that happened in the last, I would say, not more than 7-8 years. People are afraid even to come close to the area where there are, the normal judges and police will not. Actually, in Minnesota, almost the whole city of Minneapolis voted for defunding police.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why it's interesting how the wisdom of our sages it is something that I think should be repeated now in modern law, that people would start understanding how it should be done. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was just
no problem.
Interesting facts. Thank you.
That's shocking. But anyway, yeah. So I guess, as you say, it's a fact. That's what's happening. And yes, it would be amazing if people would learn from the gems of wisdom and the inspiration from the Torah. I'm going to jump to the next words of the pasuk, that with a judgment of righteousness, mishpat tzedek. So the Ohr Hachaim says that it could have just said, and they shall judge the people with righteousness. What does it mean, a judgment of righteousness? So he says that the judge in a Jewish case has to remove, this is very interesting, if you want to judge righteously, you have to remove the people. Don't think of who is the defendant or the prosecutor. Don't think of the litigants when you're judging a case. When you judge a case, you have to remove the litigants from your mind. Remove them totally from your mind. And you need to judge a case by simply thinking that this is the scenario that you're studying, maybe in more of an you're studying it as a study, not as a actual practical law. Because if you think about the people, you might end up being prejudiced and being biased. But if you think about it as this is a case, the case that I'm judging is this what happens in such a scenario. In other words, you're studying it as if you're more studying the law rather than giving a verdict on a practical case. Then you'll be able to come to a righteous conclusion, to a just conclusion. So, in other words, you consider it as if no one is there. There is no one who needs this ruling now. You're just studying it to know the halacha, the law. And after you conclude you determine what the law is, then what comes out from the term he uses is what comes out from your net, like what you fished out of this law from your matsudasai. So then you now present it and you give it to the litigants, and you can exonerate the innocent and hold accountable the one who is liable, and that's what it means. The shoftu es ha'am mishpat. You will judge the people with the judgment. In other words, this is a judgment that's already been made. You will judge the people with this judgment, and then it'll be tzedek. So it's not a judgment of righteousness. You shall judge the people with a judgment, with this judgment. In other words, take your judgment that's already a judgment and put it in front of the people, and then tzedek, this will be righteous. That's the way he learns it. Again, it doesn't fit in the English wording of the word of is not there, because in the Hebrew you don't really have the word of, and it's called mishpat tzedek, judgment righteous. So the way it works, at least it fits the Hebrew a little better. But you will judge them, present them the mishpat, the judgment that you've already judged. And this way you're not biased in any way to who they are, and this person or that person or you're friendly with, or you feel you like the way they're dressed, or you like the way their faces, their gestures, and their none of that. You're judging the case because of the case, the halacha, and then you present it to them, the judgment that's already been decided. Now, otherwise, you'll end up having some type of a incorrect and unjust conclusion. Now, he says that there is another way of interpreting this. And this other way of interpreting it, it's based on the fact that everything is decided upon. So that's a nice, what we've said now so far, very nice insight of how to come to judging righteously. And this is the way the Ohr Hachaim explains what we just said. It answers his question of why the wording is this way. Instead of saying you should judge the nation b'tzedek, with righteousness, he says a judgment of righteousness, emphasizing that the judgment was already made, not in this practical case, but in your mind. You're studying the Torah of what the halacha would be in this scenario, and then you just bring that judgment that's already a judgment and put it in front of them, and then it'll be righteous. So, in other words, you see this in it as a hint. This is a hint, a gem of wisdom from the Torah of how do you judge righteously? How do you come to the righteous judgment by not thinking about who the people are? And just studying the case as if you're studying a halacha of the Torah. Now comes the Ohr Hachaim comes and says, now I want to share with you another way of interpreting this. And that has to do with the fact that everything is judged to a person on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we're judged. And all of these judgments are decided, how much money a person's going to have, sustenance, and their health. It's all judged on Rosh Hashanah. Now, when the scenario comes that you have this lawsuit, so the case that the judges are going to be judging is really a case that has already been decided upon. Why has it been decided upon? Because the heavenly court already said what's going to happen. So when this disagreement occurs and they're brought to the judge, so when the judge gives the righteous verdict, what he's really doing is just repeating what Hashem decided on Rosh Hashanah. Because this judgment was already done in heaven. You just now have the ability to present it and to make it, again, as long as you're going to do the right thing and follow through with what Hashem wants to happen, with the way Hashem judges, you're going to follow through and do it in a righteous way, then ultimately it'll come out that everything worked perfectly. It fit hand in hand, the heavenly judgment and the way you presented it on the physical, in the physical world here, down here on earth, based on your judgment. So the wording of the pasuk basically is that they shall judge the people with a judgment of righteousness, meaning that the mishpat of tzedek is the heavenly court. So in other words, the way he's explaining it, the word righteousness in the Hebrew is tzedek, and tzedek means the heavenly court, because it says Bezdin Elyon is called tzedek. That's the way it's brought in Zohar, that the heavenly court is called tzedek. So it says V'shaftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek. You will judge the people the judgment of the heavenly court. So in other words, that where do we see that the heavenly court is called the tzedek, righteousness or justice? It's from the pasuk. It says Yishpoi Tevel b'tzedek. He judges the world with tzedek, means with the heavenly court, with righteousness, which is the heavenly court. So in other words, that the case that comes before you, you have to realize that what you're doing is basically, you're not really judging the case. You're just presenting what really was judged in heaven. In other words, you have to line up with whatever Hashem had decided, and that's what your judgment will be. It should be lined up exactly the way it was. And that's the meaning of this pasuk, that v'shaftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, and if you do it right, you'll be judging the people, the mishpat of the heavenly court. So what we're seeing here is another insight into how the world works, how Hashem makes the world work, where Hashem judges on Rosh Hashanah, and it does manifest itself sometimes, these scenarios, in the hands of a human being, and the human being, which in this case is the judge, is meant to follow through with if he does it in a righteous way, it'll follow through the way the person was judged. And that's the meaning of the verse. In other words, now the verse is sort of hinting to the way things work in the heavenly realms. You know, this is the way it works. V'shaftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek. When you're a judge, what you're really doing is judging the nation, the mishpat of the heavenly court of tzedek. Tzedek is the heavenly court. So it's another meaning of the word tzedek, and it gives us a little insight as to the fact that, you know, you should never think that what happens to you, you know, is just happening because of what someone else did. This is all from the heavenly court. This was judged on Rosh Hashanah, and so on. And obviously, if it's not done correctly and the judges do not do it righteously, what would end up happening is that somehow you're gonna get back what you're meant to in some other way. Of course, the Ohr Hachaim doesn't talk about this, but the way he explains it is that they are meant to, they should endeavor to have the judgment that they give to be the mishpat of the tzedek, of the way Hashem arranged it in heaven. And if not, I'm just adding that if not, if you do it wrong, Hashem will somehow you'll cause Hashem to have to figure out some alternative method to get you what you deserve what you're supposed to get. So these are some of the beautiful insights based on the wording, the way the Torah words it, the way Hashem worded the Torah to give us hints of halacha, hints of insights into inspiration of how to judge properly and honestly and come up with a righteous judgment and be honest in your judging, and hints into like Kabbalistic ideas or the way the way Hashem really judges on Rosh Hashanah, and we're just going to present that. We have to try to align ourselves with that, and so on. And that this basically gives us a little insight into the first pasuk of Parshas Shoftim.